Continuing on with alcohol, we need to look at why do you not use acetaminophen for the hangover? Are there any benefits to alcohol? And what are the more long-term effects of how alcohol can impact the body? So let's start off in this video dealing with hangovers and why you shouldn't use acetaminophen. Now, acetaminophen is the main ingredient in Tylenol, for example. The big problem here is acetaminophen is going to use the same component in the liver for its metabolic process as ethanol does, which means that your liver has to pick between which one it wants to prioritize. So we now have your liver saying, you know what, ethanol, get rid of that, that's more problematic. Because that acetaldehyde that is from the metabolic process is a toxin in your body. So you constantly keep doing that process. But then in the meantime, acetaminophen can start the metabolic process, but then it kind of gets hung up because you need glutathione to break down both the acetaldehydes as well as NAPQI. So you can only have so much glutathione in your system. The glutathione will deal with the acetaldehyde, but that means NAPQI, which there is a whole huge name for that, don't worry about it. But that NAPQI, which comes from the acetaminophen breakdown, starts to build up. That NAPQI is going to damage liver cells as it builds up in higher constants, which means as it accumulates, it's killing off the hepatocytes, your hepatic liver cells. Now, this damage, if enough of it builds up, could become problematic. Now, one time it happens, it shouldn't be an issue unless you already have liver damage. So if there's already liver damage and you try to have this process building more and more, you're creating more damage. Or if it's a frequent occurrence, keep having hangovers, keep taking acetaminophen. Not the best thing to keep going over and over. It can constantly damage your liver beyond what happened from the alcohol and the acetaldehyde. So the good thing here is, as long as you're not taking that, the body can usually keep up with moderate alcohol consumption. But again, over excess can cause damage. So in the short term, alcohol use, most of those symptoms go away. If you have a hangover, it's gone in hours or maybe a day if you have a bad one. But the idea is alcohol consumption on the short term cannot be necessarily problematic by itself. But if it starts having excessive consumption, a couple days later, excessive consumption, and it's happening a couple times a week, now we're looking at problems. Because long-term excessive consumption of alcohol, that usually leads to more permanent damage in the body. And this permanent damage isn't just the liver. It can affect various different parts of your body. So let's start with the brain. Now, a normal, healthy brain looks kind of like what you see up top here. But if you have excessive alcohol consumption over a longer period of time, so now this varies by person to person. It could be long consumption over months, years, decades. Depends on the individual. Depends on how their body handles it. But regardless, the brain can become impacted, like you see at the bottom here. The idea is the brain, just like any other tissue in the body, if it starts to have a buildup of acetaldehyde, remember that's the product of metabolism of ethanol. If that acetaldehyde starts to build up, it's toxic. It will damage the tissues, which means the brain will have reduced functionality and more problems as it goes along. The more acetaldehyde that builds up, the worse the problems will become. Secondly, the adrenal glands. Adrenal glands are found sitting on top of the kidneys, kind of like little hats over the kidneys. Your adrenal glands from alcohol could have stimulation to produce epinephrine. Now, epinephrine comes right out of the middle, or called the medulla, of the adrenal glands. But epinephrine, more known as adrenaline, is going to stimulate glucagon production. Now, glucagon is going to be a hormone. Glucagon is meant to cause your glucose levels to rise in your blood. It's pretty much there if you're in more of a fasting state. So it pulls out your reserve glucoses and utilizes those, which means it's going to stimulate glycogen to be broken down into glucose. Think glyconeolysis. Now in glycogenolysis, you're taking those big glycogen molecules, breaking them into individual glucoses, and putting them in your blood. That's usually meant if your blood levels are low. But in the case of alcohol, it's kind of short-circuited that process, which means you're getting elevated levels of glucose in the blood now. The liver, saying, hey, this shouldn't be here, starts to reuptake and pull more and more glucose back into the liver. But at the same time, your body is also being stimulated to metabolize your fat reserves, which is going to cause the fat reserves to be brought up, and then you can again have more fatty acids be available in the blood. Again, the liver's looking at this, say, this is a problem, tries to reuptake and absorb more. Well, all this excess glucose and fatty acids can cause the liver to basically have too much fat deposit, which could result in fatty liver disease. In the case of fatty liver disease, it's one of the alcohol liver diseases, ALDs. Hepatic steatosis. So hepatic steatosis is going to be what fatty liver disease is. It's a lot easier to do fatty liver disease. Now, it can be reversible to a point. So if it's caught in enough time, person stops drinking, then they're able to start reversing and the liver starts to become healthier and healthier. But again, stop drinking. If you keep drinking, it's going to keep causing the same problems. But that all comes down to when it was caught, how much fat is in the liver, and can it start to regenerate and help basically heal itself. But there are also other ALDs, or alcohol liver diseases. One is known as alcohol hepatitis. In the case of alcohol hepatitis, it mirror images viral hepatitis, so that jaundice still the liver. But in this case, it's because there's damage to the liver from that acetaldehyde or from the excess amount of fat, and it causes inflammation. Inflammation in the liver then causes decreased functionality because the cells can't just function properly. Again, this one can clear up to a point if it's caught and if alcohol consumption is stopped. But if it continues, it potentially could go into cirrhosis of the liver. Now, cirrhosis of the liver is the most severe of the ALDs, or alcohol liver diseases. That's because in this case, the liver now is producing scar tissue. The scar tissue is not reversible. So as the tissue becomes scarred, it becomes non-functional. By being non-functional, obviously the liver then now cannot process the toxins. It can't process that acetaldehyde. It can't process other toxins in the blood. So as alcohol consumption continues, that acetaldehyde plus the other toxins just build up, and you can't get rid of them. You can't process them. So 3 different problems there. They're all considered alcohol liver diseases. Mild, if you want to say mild, is the fatty liver disease. Can reverse. It's kind of the starting point. Building up, then you have the alcohol hepatitis. More problematic, but still can be helped. The worst one is cirrhosis. At that point, unfortunately, there's not much help for the liver. The damage is done. It's irreversible. Now, does that say that anybody that's a chronic drinker will get these? No, some people don't. It all depends on that person, their genetics, how much they drink, their enzyme levels, how the body can process. So there isn't one clear cut, this has to happen, but it's concerns to watch out for. So it's potential problems for that alcohol consumption. Now again, this is excessive alcohol consumption, not moderation. But there are other issues as well. Now we know that in the blood, the liver is going to take up fatty acids. We already mentioned that. But as you take up those fatty acids, the liver then releases VLDLs, very low density lipoproteins. Hopefully that rings a bell from previous videos. Those very low density lipoproteins will then circulate through the blood. They're converted into IDLs, intermediate density lipoproteins, which then are converted into LDLs, low density lipoproteins. Now remember, LDLs are your bad cholesterol, which means you're elevating levels of bad cholesterol, elevating levels of these cholesterol molecules in your circulation. That can lead to atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is going to be the buildup of cholesterol or plaques inside your vessels, making them more narrow and causing problems with blood flow. This can cause then a whole series of other problems down the line, from blood pressure issues to vessel integrity to heart problems. So really, overconsumption can be quite problematic here. That's why looking at alcohol consumption, you have to really take a hard look and say, what is it for? What's the benefits? Now, on the flip side, there is some research saying that there are some benefits to moderation. Again, moderation was 1 drink per the CDC for females, 2 drinks per the CDC for males per day. Now, some of this research is saying that there's health benefits like lowering of blood pressure, the reduction of potential heart disease, the reduction in potentiality of type 2 diabetes or metabolic order disorders. Now, all these, though, they're saying are potential. There's no hard, concrete evidence for this yet. So while you have research papers like this saying that's beneficial, there's also other research papers saying that's not beneficial. So this is still a kind of back and forth discussion that's occurring here. But you have to then take into account, is there a mental benefit to it? Does it help relax an individual? Relaxation is a benefit. Does it help relieve stress in individuals in moderate consumption? That can also be beneficial. So it's kind of weighing the two different sides here of, is it helpful because it's helping us reduce stress, helping relax? But on the other side, what's it doing to the body as far as the metabolic processes? What's happening in the liver? So there's kind of a give and take here. There really is no one clear cut, alcohol is good, alcohol is bad. It depends on the person, depends how you use it, and depends what's going on. There are some people that never touch alcohol. No problem, no issues. Other people, unfortunately, have too much of it. It comes down to personal decisions and how you live your life. There is no one right or wrong answer, unless you're choosing, hey, I'm going to have high consumption. That's not the best choice. So, alcohol. A few things to think about and how the body processes. Until the next video.